Welcome. I'm Linda Barefoot, co-chair of Book Sandwiched In, along with Melanie Jarvis. Today we are pleased to present a joint discussion with Captain Craig Reaves, along with his daughter Molly, and Beverly Bauer Jennings. And we'll introduce the ladies first. Beverly Bauer Jennings is a master naturalist. Her love of saltwater fishing began in Connecticut with a small white wooden rowboat named Little Fish. She has carried her love and curiosity about saltwater life into Hilton Head and the Low Country. Beverly created the shrimp, oyster, and crabbing exhibits for the Port Royal Maritime Center. In addition, she created the exhibit for BASF for the Coastal Discovery Museum on Hilton Head. This work, as well as multiple interviews with fishermen and marine biologists, have served as the basis for her book, Shrimp Tales, Small Bites of History. This book is a culmination of years of research and data collection. Her work, time, and proceeds from sales of this book go to the South Carolina Food Alliance. Welcome, Beverly. Captain Craig Reaves is a lifelong shrimper and commercial fisherman. He is the owner of Sea Eagle Market in Beaufort. He was born in North Carolina into a fishing family and started shrimping at the age of 14. By age 16, he captained his own boat called the Boy Shrimper. They both had boats. In 1992, his family and their shrimp boats relocated to Beaufort County. In time, Captain Reaves and his family expanded their business. The Reaves, including his wife, children, Molly, brothers, and parents, operate a multi-generational enterprise. Their business has grown into the region's largest local seafood supplier. They currently supply 65 plus restaurants, operate Sea Eagle Market, and oversee a working waterfront on St. Helena Island. Craig Reaves remains an active captain. He's dressed. He oversees daily operations at Sea Eagle and is an active voice against imported seafood fraud. He serves on the Southern Shrimp Alliance and Beaufort Area Hospitality Association boards. His goal is to push back against foreign shrimp dumping, unfair trade, and environmental threats. With Beaufort's fleet down from 100 boats in 1992 to under 15 today, Captain Reaves promotes buying wild-caught U.S. shrimp. In addition, he supports efforts to build a new generation of fishermen. We welcome both Beverly, Captain Craig, and Molly, and hope you enjoy Shrimp Tales, Small Bites of History.
I don't know if the mic's on. They're on. Can you hear me? Okay, it's on. Okay, I guess I will start. I got a call about doing this book Sandwiched In about a year ago, and I thought that this would be a great book to talk about, and because it's really a book about my life and my family history. So in that, I've been a very good friend with Miss Beverly and a contributor to the book for well over 10 years now, because the picture of us in the book was actually leaving the very first shrimp festival done at Sea Pines. So we took the Gracie Belle into Harbor Town, which I don't think there's ever been a commercial shrimp boat in Harbor Town. And I was slightly nervous pulling in there. We left the railway at Hudson's. We had just took the boat out of the water. And when we launched back in, I went to Sea Pines. So she was all polished up, looking nice, but it's still, we don't have bow thrusters, and Harbor Town is kind of tight. But that Sunday, I think it was a Sunday when we were leaving, I think you were just there. It was just a random, spontaneous thing, or did we plan it? I think it was really spontaneous. I'm like, you want to ride back to Port Royal? And so she jumped on the boat with me and my dad, and we rode back to what was the shrimp docks in Port Royal that day before we went back to St. Helena to our dock. So that's just a little bit of our history. But that picture of us standing at the wheel was from that day when we took the boat back from the very first shrimp festival at Sea Pines. So if you'd like, we'll start with you talking about the book and like what it took for you to put this much history. Another thing that I really love about this is I'm not a reader, so there's a lot of pictures. So I'm a picture book guy. Okay, I'm gonna confess that. So this is right up my alley. You know, I can read the blurbs and things, and it's just really awesome how it's done and you captured so much history. So if you'd like,
Well, Craig has been so supportive. Just he would answer all my questions, and he suggested where the donations for the sales of this book would go. And I don't subtract the costs. I donate the whole price of the book. But Craig and his whole family, have been very, very supportive, and I've enjoyed several trips on the Gracie Belle, and I like going out to St. Helena's, and it's I've learned a lot. And I will. I'm always indebted. And I started with these exhibits at the Port Royal Sound Maritime Center on shrimping, crabbing, and oystering, and I realized that there really wasn't much. There wasn't much on the shrimping. So, sorry, I've never been accused of being quiet. One of my friends said, you really need to write a book because you have all these interviews for the shrimpers, and I think it would be great. And I spoke to them and said, would you like me to do this? And they were very encouraged that I was going to be preserving their history. So that's what I've done.
Okay.
And then the book travels up the coast because the early commercial shrimping started in Florida. Now I'm going to let Craig tell you more.
All right, so I don't really know where to go. We're going to kind of field this back and forth a little bit, but then I want to really make sure we have time for question and answers because I think that's really important. I think people are becoming more aware of our industry and the plight of our industry. So I kind of reviewed back over the book this morning just to kind of glance back through it, and it was mentioned the SSA, which is the Southern Shrimp Alliance, which is an 8-state alliance from Texas to North Carolina, which I serve on that board as a representative from South Carolina. Myself and Taylor Tarbin, each state has 2 seats on the board, and I've been on that board for about 15 years. It was started in 2002 with trade actions about anti-dumping because other countries were flooding our markets. And this really didn't start in the early 2000s. It started 30 or 40 years ago with a lot of money being funneled to third world countries to start aquaculture. And over the years, we've realized that a lot of it came through the World Bank, which is the United States funds that. So we've, as our own country funded, all these things that now we know are very detrimental to the environment and all kinds of stuff that we could talk about, slave labor, antibiotics, all that stuff is issues that the SSA works on for the last 2 decades. But the reason I wanted to bring that up is Fernandina is kind of where you start, right? St. Augustine and Fernandina.
Yes.
And one of our original board members I was in Tampa in January at our annual board meeting, and Sal Visaggi is still on our board, and I don't know how old he is, but he's got to be in his 80s or pushing 90. But we did a little workshop, did a timeline in history, and his family, he put his date for his family was 1912. And it was probably before that, but I think that's when they kind of incorporated and really started an official business, but they were probably shrimping in the 1800s. But so when I saw the Versages in here, Sal was on the board. So that's kind of the cross section of our board of directors, it still has that deep of ties. My dad started shrimping in the 60s as a teenager, and like the introduction, I started in the mid 80s. Probably spent my first summer, I was probably 14, 15, and my dad bought the boys shrimper out of McCullumville. It was a long line boat, but it was originally a shrimp trawler transformed to long line, and it had been from Nicaragua to Massachusetts, so it had bulletproof glass in it. South America or Central America, a lot of wars going on in the 70s and 80s, so they literally had piracy stuff, but also rough weather, so seas could literally knock the windows out. So I guess the windows had been knocked out or shot out enough that they put bulletproof glass in there, so we had to remove that because back in the 80s we didn't have generators and fancy stuff. We had to lower the windows to get a breeze. But I started out as a teenager shrimping while I was still in high school. Never thought I would do it for a living because I got seasick, and but by the time I graduated high school, I went straight into to the shrimping industry, and that's pretty much been our life's work. And we are, generational, our business. My mom and dad were always part of that. They're in their late 70s now, both still with us. My dad's 78, mom's 76. But my older, so to just back up and pump, my brother, who is a shrimper now in town, has got the Palmetto Pride. He came 18 years later. So I was a senior in high school when my brother was born. The only reason I bring that up is because my wife and I kind of did the same thing. We realized that my mom and dad's got two generations. Me being 18 years older, we kind of hit that slot twice. So right now, as I sit here, my oldest child is 35. I had two kids, and we fostered a couple. And then we had Molly, who is 17, and I have an 11-year-old son. So I've got a 33-year-old son and an 11-year-old son. So I kind of checked the boxes for double generations because, I'm like, well, the only way we're going to survive is to create our own workforce, because there's nobody crazy enough to get in the seafood industry. And do you got Joe Shipman in there?
I do not. I'm sorry.
When we moved here in 1992, my dad had met Corky White, which was White Shrimp Company.
Got him.
We were at Shipman's Dock Road, so that was old man Joe Shipman. But he told me when we first moved here, he said, don't ever count your hours, because you're not getting paid by the hour. He's like, you'll quit and go do something else because, you really, it's something you have to be passionate about, and it's kind of been rough to see our industry in such decline over the last 30 years. When we moved here, the fleet was still strong. Over 100 trawlers, like I said, in Beaufort County alone. And now there's probably 15, which we own 3 of the 15. I have 2, and my brother has 1. We normally keep about 5 boats at our dock on Village Creek. But I could count maybe to 50 trawlers in the whole state of South Carolina left. And so that's the state of the shrimping industry here, but that's true from Brownsville, Texas to the Virginia line. We've lost our working waterfront. It's the graying of the fleet, or, the aging of the fleet and the graying of the captains. There's just, it's a vanishing fleet, it's a vanishing industry. And if you talk about it on a national level, 96% of what's being, or 94% of what's being consumed in the United States is imported, and domestically we're 6% of the market now. So the likelihood that you're eating fresh local shrimp is not high. How about what you got? You wanna...
Well, there was a Bloomberg Business did a very interesting article several years ago, and I have the cover of it. And it talks about the dangers of the imported fish and seafood from Asia. How the pigs are in one bed, and because they're in a very closed environment, they have to give them antibiotics to keep them healthy. And those spill into the tilapia beds, and they have to give the tilapia antibiotics because they're living in their environment. It's a closed environment, not open ocean. And they are getting residue from the pigs, and then what the tilapia, they're above where the shrimp beds are, so the residue from their antibiotics, the pig antibiotics, and then the antibiotics they give the shrimp when they farm raise them, is quite a bit of antibiotics that is in their systems. And it's a very interesting article to read.
Well, and there's so much negative stuff coming out of the imported stuff. Number one, India's producing about 50% of what's coming into the United States, and between India and Ecuador, they're about 75% of what's coming into the country. But definitely Southeast Asia has the trouble with illegal or banned antibiotics. And at our last meeting, we learned about EQ. I forget what the actual word is, but if you just type in or Google EQ, it's a new thing that SSA is tracking, and it's coming through their feed, actually, through what they're feeding the fish and feeding aquaculture, and that's another chemical that's carrying through to human consumption. But there's forced labor, all kinds of things, destruction of the mangroves and the environment because of these fish farms. There's so much that's going on in Southeast Asia that would never be allowed to happen here, but yet we take the product in. Shrimp is inspected at a rate of less than 1% at the port of entry. All seafood combined is at about a rate of 2%, but shrimp is at 0.7%, so less than 1%. And when it's inspected, over 50% fail. The EU inspects imported seafood at a rate about 50%. So all the countries that are doing it wrong won't even send shrimp or seafood to the EU because they know they have a 50% chance of it being checked at a port of entry. And the EU also has a destroy clause. So if they check a container and it's got antibiotics that's banned or it's over the level that's an acceptable level, they destroy it. The United States is so nice that if you happen to get the less than 1% inspection, we don't destroy it. We just put it back on a ship and it leaves Miami and goes to New Orleans or Houston, which has got a 99% chance that it's not going to be inspected there. So what gets checked gets to go back on a boat and sail to the next port of entry. We have legislation right now in D.C. that's going to change that, where if we do catch them, we're going to destroy that product. That will help some. But there's a lot of things like that that's very frustrating to us because our facilities, you've been up and down the coast, every shrimp dock, every processing facility, every restaurant, every seafood market, we're inspected. And we're expected to be at 100% compliance. You know, you see food grades on a restaurant's door, you want to see an A, right? You're not really real happy if you go in a restaurant and you see a C because you know they've been tagged for something. So we've got to work hard to be compliant. And, you know, we don't just have, you know, DHEC or the Ag Department or the FDA and HACCP plans and all these. It's layers and layers of things that we do here, you know, And that's fine. Food safety is great. Nobody's against regulations and all that, but it's like, how is that fair? That's an unfair trade where you can say you can do whatever you want in Indonesia or India, and you have another open border that you're not going to get inspected. And so the environmental cost, the human cost, and all that. So those are the kind of things that we're up against, and it's very, very frustrating on our side.
Isn't some of the prohibited, China and some of those countries,
Get your mic.
aren't some of the countries packaging and sending their product to Ecuador and Malaysia to try to get it in the United States?
So early on, China was doing that. China was one of the big countries that were doing imported seafood early on, and they were definitely backdoor to Malaysia, and some other countries got caught. Something that I learned in January in Tampa, China's kind of out of it. They're on the level of who's bringing imported seafood. China is less than 1% of what's coming into the country now, and they don't even think they're backdooring it anymore. They're just either they've got enough people with their 1.2 billion people that they're trying to feed, or it's going somewhere else. But China was definitely one of those that didn't pay tariffs and didn't really participate well in the correction stuff. But India has came from, being down here to number one. So it's India, Ecuador, and Indonesia are the top three right now. But
I remember you telling me a story about one of the boats that you got. It was sunk at the dock.
well, so I read that too. Some of that we kind of got messed up. But
Whoops.
there's some errors. we can.
Uh-oh.
We need them white out. So I've actually over the years raised a lot of boats. So it was one of those things, kind of like fishermen helping fishermen, and so I have a lot of stories of boats that were in peril or sunk that we raised and brought back to life. But the Gracie Belle is one, which is in the book, and I'll get the story straight, so you'll know now when you look in there.
I have to correct it.
So the Gracie Belle, my dad built a shrimp boat in 1973 called the Captain Craig in Holden Beach. And at the same time, Junior Backman, the Backman fleet out of Folly Beach in Charleston, was building the Backman Elizabeth, named after his mom. So they were built literally side by side or within a half mile of each other. It's at 1973. My dad and Junior Backman were good friends. The Captain Craig ended up burning. We lost her in 1977 in Key West. But long story short, 1999, the Backmans at one point was a huge fleet and known up and down the coast. They're having 5 shrimp boats working out of Folly. But it was 98 or 99, I'm pretty sure it was 1999. Somebody took the Backman Elizabeth to go out of Folly Inlet, Folly Beach, if you're familiar. It's kind of a treacherous inlet. And the captain got aground going out for opening day. Normally that happens in May. And so he bumped bottom, ended up turning around, going back to the dock, didn't tell Junior. So the boat was leaking more. All boats kind of leak a little bit. So we have bilge pumps. But you kind of know what kind of pumps you need normally. So anyway, Junior comes the next day and the boat sunk, sitting on the bottom at the fish house. So they messed with this boat for about 21 days, and Junior finally calls my dad frustrated, and a lot of the boats that we raise off the bottom, they attempt to float them, and then they end up calling us, and we get them up. But so I went to Charleston, my dad, my first cousin, and we dive on this boat 6 out of 7 tides. So that means low water in the morning, low water at night. We were in the dark, wrapping the boat with plastic and plywood. At the bow, it was 6 feet down at low tide. The stern would be sticking up like that. So we built plywood around the front of the house and wrapped it with plastic. We would have got it up sooner, but every time we would go to the motel and try to get 2 or 3 hours sleep, Junior would change the tractor, which was kind of holding it up, and then so it has a list this way. By the time Junior pulls on it, it's got a list this way, so now we got a plywood the other side, that was up. So we ended up basically wrapping the whole boat, and took like 5 3-inch pumps. But finally we get her up, and the next day, like it's in the book, my dad had this boat running that had been sunk for 3 weeks, flushes the V12 Detroit and drives it to Beaufort. No running lights, no nothing, covered in mud and barnacles. And we've got some pretty cool pictures when she come back. But the Bachman Elizabeth is the Gracie Belle. I think in the book you say the Brandy. So that'll kind of straighten those out a little bit. But the Brandy we got from Corky White in '96, and that's the boat my wife called my girlfriend, because I spent more time with Brandy than I did with her in 1996. So if you ever hear my wife talking about my girlfriend, she's talking about a boat. So yeah, the Boy Shrimper is the only boat we came here with. I don't know what you got back there. Just flipping her through. But yeah, so the Boy Shrimper we came to Beaufort with, and then we've kind of grew over the years with different boats in and out. One of the stories that you kind of mentioned, I might bring up. There's a great section about festivals and blessings of the fleet. So you've got several of our boats in there, but the one that I wanted to highlight was the Challenger, and that was 2005. We trimmed her in pink, and my mom, on her 55th birthday, found out she had breast cancer. So we painted the boat pink. Our boats are always trimmed in orange. And we do a lot with the Beaufort Water Festival. So that year we showed up in pink. Do you have a picture of that?
I do, but I don't know where it is.
So that was 2005, and that was the 50th year. And we always kind of play the theme of the festival with a Christian idea. So if you see some of the pictures that don't have the Christian theme on it, it meant we had more than one boat there, because my mom always liked to work the theme of the festival, and I like talking about Jesus. So I would, whichever boat I had, I would have a youth group on there and have some Christian themes in the background. But so that year with the pink boat, it was the only one, the Challenger was the only boat we brought, and we tied it with Beaufort Water Festival making waves for 50 years, Jesus Christ making waves for 2,000 years. So we kind of always play on that kind of stuff.
Sorry, I had errors.
No, this is...
One thing that I've always thought was quite interesting. I'm sorry. One thing I thought was quite interesting was when the Sicilians and the Portuguese arrived in Florida in the early 1900s, they thought that shrimp were worms.
I saw that. Yeah.
And they had fed them to their livestock or used them for fertilizer. And there were a lot of shrimp in the Florida waters, and the local people were eating them. And they finally decided that they should catch them and market them, and that's when they started developing the boats and making the otter trawl nets into the nets that we have now and the boats that we have now. It's an interesting start.
Yeah, and that's kind of a cool segue into downtown Beaufort. The train literally came down Bay Street, and early on in the 20s and 30s probably, with the fishing docks downtown, they would pack shrimp in boxcars on ice and ship to New York. And that happened up and down. So whether it was, and you see a lot of canneries. So they canned oysters, they canned crab meat, and they canned shrimp, because that was, a lot of refrigeration wasn't available back then. So we had that here, but they also transported by train, and that kind of helped the industry get going early 1900s, to mid 1900s. There's a lot of that kind of stuff. And like the bluefin tuna, this is off topic, but the 1950s, if you ever watch Wicked Tuna, they kind of talk about how the bluefin tuna was almost wiped out in the 1950s. It was for cat food. They didn't even eat it. Lobster story's kind of the same thing. Lobster really wasn't ate. They were feeding it to prisoners. Lobsters was considered a nuisance in the beginning. It wasn't until the trains and going out west that it. So the history of seafood is kind of cool. That lobster went from being prison food to very luxurious and expensive. And I think that's kind of what we got to figure out now. Why shrimp is treated like a commodity when the domestic shrimp is only 6% of the market. It should be an elevated product demanding the highest price. We're always going to have imported seafood, and that's just a fact. But the fraud, selling imported as local, has got to stop. And then the demanding of the local should demand a higher price, not treated as a commodity like corn and whoever's got the cheapest price. But in Texas, we believe Texas shrimp should be most valuable, and I believe in South Carolina caught shrimp should be most valuable.
Also, soft-shell crabs were fed to the pigs in Bluffton.
Yeah.
I'm sure other places, but I was told in Bluffton.
Well, this morning I mentioned to Molly that I was doing this today, so I hadn't even mentioned it to her, and she was getting out of school about 11:30. So I'm like, well, I think this is a unique opportunity for what we're doing, talking about a book, and then not only do you have the author, but somebody that's kind of lived the history for 40 years now, but to have that next generation's perspective. So I don't know, would you like to say anything?
I think the first thing that came to mind while you were talking was talking about the Bachman Elizabeth. And I think it's important to mention the reason why we would call Leighton Reaves. I think he was very well known to all the shrimpers, and the fleets were huge. Whenever you're talking about North Carolina, South Carolina, I feel like a lot of people knew him. He's always talking about his stories. He's 78, so he's got all the stories to tell us as his grandkids. And he was called MacGyver. That was his nickname. Okay.
It was hard luck Leighton before that.
But a lot of people knew him as MacGyver, and if you knew him more personally, his name was Papa. That's what all of his grandkids call him. So if you were close enough, that's what you'd call him. But he would get phone calls from friends through different states, about how their engine sounded. And it would be like, they're going to hold their phone up and be like, can you tell me what this problem was? And I mean, he really could do it. I'm sure there were times that he didn't. But I think that's one reason that, you have these friends and they have a problem, and you were able to call on him, Leighton Reaves, and he was going to show up and be there to help you. And so that really shows the friendship that the shrimpers had. This wasn't just showing up to work, you got to make it work. No, you had friends. This was a family. You didn't have to be blood, but you were working hard for something that you loved, and that made you family. And we still see that today. We're half and half for the most part at Sea Eagle, family owned and operated, but we also have, strangers that come in and have worked with us. And I can tell you, I don't know how long I've worked at the market, but it's been most of my life between the boats and actually being in the building. There has never been an employee that was not like family to me, whether they were there for a week or if they were there for 10 years. These people become your family because it is a sacrifice to show up every day, good weather, bad weather. You know, I don't feel good, but we still have to show up because we are trying to feed the community. We want to give you fresh shrimp. And so that's been very impactful on my life and my outlook on life. Yeah, I don't know what else to say.
That's good.
Yeah, I can remember one time that my dad got called and there was a boat broke down in Brunswick, Georgia. And we're here in Beaufort. And if you get in your car and drive to Brunswick, what's that, an hour and a half or 2 hours,
2
according to
hours.
how fast you drive?
2 hours.
Hour and a half for me, 2 hours for you. So let's just call it 2 hours. Well, from here to Brunswick is 12 hours on a shrimp boat, or 14, according to whether you got the wind and the tide on your bow or on your stern. You might can make up a little time, but so that's a 12-hour steam to go rescue a boat that's broke down. His transmission went out. And he tows this guy back to Port Royal again when the city dock was there in Port Royal. So he goes in Port Royal Sound, ties him up, and that's probably 18 or 20 hours back because now you got a boat under tow. So it's a 2 or 3 jet day project just to get him here. Well, he can't get a mechanic and get the boat fixed. So now he asked my dad after he's already went to Brunswick, because he's out of Murrells Inlet, and so his home port was Georgetown. So now he's like, you know, Leighton, can you tow me to Georgetown? So then he goes back to Port Royal, hooks up, tows him back out, and another 18 or 20 hours to Georgetown, you know, and that's the kind of, people don't, you know, understand that fishermen is a tight-knit community. So that's an extreme example of my dad's kindness. But up and down the coast, we never leave a fisherman behind, kind of like the military motto. We take care of each other. We're out on time.
We've got about 20 minutes.
Do you guys want to ask a few questions, maybe?
Guy in the middle.
All right.
I'll speak up loud. 2 questions. One, the shrimp population out there is probably as good as it's ever been. Is that right?
It's kind of hard to track shrimp populations because it's an annual crop. So some species of seafood you can put protections in. Just take grouper snapper. If it's overfished, it could take 20 or 30 years of regulations before you see that species rebound, because a fish's got to live 20 or 30 years till it gets to a reproduction age. So those are long-term rebuilds. But shrimp is an annual crop, so it's not going to live to a second or third year, where like if you don't put effort in, your shrimp populations are going to be greater. So yes, I would say yes, there's probably as much shrimp as there's ever been, and there's maybe some signs that it's increasing and better, because if you don't have a winter event, your wintering shrimp live and then become your spring roe shrimp. In 2018, we had a big freeze, and 98 or 99% of our wintering crop was killed. South Carolina and Georgia did a 25-mile closure to protect whatever was left, and by 2019 we had another good crop and it rebound from that. But still, the issues that we face in the industry is like heavy development in estuaries, and our creeks and our estuaries being populated by people. So you find very few places along our coast a lot of times where you don't have, docks, golf courses, and residencies, which change the environment for the estuaries. So, that could impact, crab populations and shrimp populations as well.
Second question, a little more delicate.
Okay?
We don't buy from you guys or the local shrimpers. Do any of the public markets carry it? Number one. And number two, local restaurants. I don't want to know the ones that don't. How about giving a plug for the ones that do?
Okay. So there is a domestic, market outside of what's being done in Beaufort. And there's other places besides Sea Eagle. Definitely, Gay Fish, Skeeter White's got Sweet Tails. There's local boats and local fishermen that are out there, peddling local product. But you can definitely get domestic wild-caught U.S. seafood from from a food truck if you're a restaurant. Cisco, U.S. Foods, PFG. They're all going to have an option for a domestic product. It's just, what the restaurant wants to pay for. So imports are offered and domestic stuff is offered. I would say that most grocery stores have a combination too. So you look and it may have on the bag, wild caught Gulf shrimp, or it may, have something else saying product of USA. That's something I think Ms. Beverly was leaning in on earlier. That's one of the first things that the SSA did in the early 2000s was get cool labeling, which is country of origins. And so that helped in grocery stores. So in my opinion, that helps educate our customer base. So like if I go in Piggly Wiggly, which is where I like to shop locally, I can look at two ribeyes. One's going to say product of Mexico normally, and one's going to be USA. If I can afford the domestic ribeye, I'm going to buy that. If I can't, then at least I know what I'm getting and where it came from. So that's an educated consumer. You know what I'm saying? So the cool labeling didn't just help seafood, it helped across the board where we have country of origin labeling on that stuff. So if you see that, it came from the work that SSA did with cool labeling. Now what the importers do, and I've posted on this and other people have picked it up on social media, is they'll use some branding, some misleading branding on the front. So it might have some red, white, and blue, waving in the thing, and then some companies take like this one importer, Great American something, and on the back, and I've got pictures of the front of the bag and the back of the bag, and it's product of Indonesia. But the front of the bag is very misleading. And unless you turn it over and search for the country of origin labeling, you would assume you're getting something that gives you a feel good because you saw your little red, white, and blue.
Part of my question, though, you're avoiding.
Okay?
The restaurants.
You brought a list. Didn't you bring a list?
Where can you be sure you're going to get local shrimp?
So we do have a list out front. South Carolina Shrimpers Association is working hard with its partners throughout the state of South Carolina, listing people that are selling direct in the market. So they would ask me, who do I sell to? And they would make that list. Guys that are in Charleston or McCullumville would turn in their list. So there's an extensive list through South Carolina Shrimpers Association that I think we have out front at our table. For me, and here's the other thing. Some restaurants will buy some shell-on shrimp. I can think of one restaurant in town that I sell to, 50 pound at a time, and that's basically going in their menu as a peel and eat. So whether it's Low Country Bull or it's just you buy it about a half pound or quarter pound or whatever. But I know because I'm in their kitchen, that the shrimp that's being fried or the shrimp that might be stuffed shrimp or whatever, they're using a different product. So a lot of restaurants may have some blended menus where they're buying some local and some imported. What Baja, and that's the Beaufort Area Hospitality Association, and I'm on that board of directors too, we're working on a logo for the door and for the menu that can brand, themselves. And so we want that identification even to the item, because if you're using that local shrimp for your steamed shrimp, we want to see actual evidence that you're benefiting. So if people see that sticker and you buy that product more in their POS system, they're going to say, well, if I had that on my other, maybe that would increase sales. So the fraud is people assuming that they're buying local, and it seems to me like the closer you are, like if your restaurant overlooks a shrimp dock, like Shem Creek, for instance, or Merle's Inlet, the closer you are to having those boats in the background, the iconic value, probably the greater the fraud. Because they don't have to buy it local, people assume it already, and so that's some of the fraud.
Thank you both for being here today, sure. But concerning import shrimp, what is the impact of any regarding tariffs, applicable tariffs?
Okay. Well, I spoke on a national level on several interviews, and I always tried to point out that it's education, educating the public. So I felt like tariffs initially was just getting that out there, helped educate the public to what's really going on. But I always felt like tariffs were going to be negotiated away or negotiated down. So when it first came up, yes, sir.
Is there a current applicable, any kind of help with the tariff on import shrimp for your industry or not at this point?
Yeah, so immediately we saw a bump. The prices this past year were better than they were in previous years. But again, being in a national conversation, when I went on Fox News, the staff at the market did not know that I was going to the dock to do an interview, and our phone rang off the hook from I didn't get from the dock to the end of the dirt road, and my wife's calling me and she's like, oh, what are we going to do? Because Oregon, Minnesota, Ohio, Alabama, people saw it and they wanted, to figure out how they could support and how they could buy local seafood. So we relaunched our website, and now we do national shipping nationwide to try to get, instead of just being small and local, we're have that vehicle now that we can get shrimp anywhere in the country. I'm trying to make sure, did that answer your question?
Reason being, tariffs have been both pro and con in certain industries. The steel industry has been affected disproportionately in one sense. But so I was just wondering if it had any help with the shrimp industry, basically.
Yeah, I mean, most folks in the shrimp industry believe it has had a positive impact for us. But that being said, cost of goods for us go up because a lot of the things that we use, like webbing and things, a lot of our infrastructure that used to be made in the USA has been outsourced. So across the board, not just talking about seafood, but we have become a consuming nation instead of a producing nation. So the things that we need, our baskets, our webbing, tools, generators, everything we buy, most of it is imported too, so our costs go up on that side as well. So there's always pros and cons to tariffs. Yes, sir.
Which is more important to you, fresh and local or local frozen?
What do you mean? That's
Which is more important to your business model?
okay.
Do you sell more fresh and local, or do you sell more local that is frozen?
Can I answer this one?
Yeah.
All right, so I want to start off by saying that my main job working for Sea Eagle is our cashier, which means I answer the phones and I talk to people directly. And a lot of the times, people will come to me knowing that I'm Craig's daughter, and they'll ask me questions because I want to be as straightforward and honest and open with you. So I would say that a lot of customers, from a first glance, their first question, has this ever been frozen? And we do try our best to have non-frozen shrimp. But if you look at our fleet, as he said, we have 3 boats. 2 of those are ice boats. Or one's ice, 2's freezer. So the majority of the shrimp that comes into our docks is going to be a frozen product. And that's not inherently bad. They're frozen at sea. So we have a process to have these frozen. They come up in nets, just like an ice boat. They go onto the table, and they're cold through. So that means we get rid of all the byproduct, just like on an ice boat. And then they're put into bags and put into what's called a brine tank, which is basically super salty water. And then they're put into a freezer and frozen within a couple seconds?
Well, the brine tank process takes 2 or 3 minutes. So they're IQF, individually quick frozen. So they're in a sack, the onion sack or whatever, they're basically like peanuts. They're not block frozen, they're individually quick frozen in this brine water, salt water. And then our fish holes have been converted to freezers, and our fish holes are -5. So we hold these shrimp or suspend these shrimp in a way that they literally were caught and frozen as they're picked up. And so now when the shrimp season is not open, I can still be pulling these shrimp out the freezer and deheading them, and I can pull out 500 pound or 5,000, dehead them, and they're literally like the day that they were caught. Where an ice boat, which is what we did typically throughout history until more recent history, when one of the modernizations is freezing at sea, your aging process starts immediately. So every day you're at sea, that shrimp's getting older. So if a guy's been out for 4 or 5 days, some guys stay out for 8 or 10 days on ice. My dad talks about the 70s in Key West where he stayed out 20 days. He's like, I wouldn't eat them, but I sold them. Those were pink shrimp, and a lot of that stuff back then was not doing what we're doing now. We're all about niche market and high quality over high volume. Back in the day, shrimp prices were cheap too, 70, 80 cents, $1 a pound. So those guys were working on volume and putting it on a truck. There was no niche market. There was no fancy restaurants, in Beaufort or wherever to peddle your stuff and an educated, farm to table kind of concept. So they went out to catch volume, and then it went on an 18-wheeler and it went to the Gulf to be processed, and that was before the imports as well. So that we called it the breader truck, because those shrimp were going to a processor that was literally going to bread the shrimp, and it was going to go to your restaurant chains like Red Lobster used to buy domestic, your Captain D's, all those places that had popcorn shrimp and all that stuff was all using domestic back then. So it would go from wherever on the East Coast to the Gulf Coast, Louisiana, Alabama, wherever the processors were, and then be peeled and deveined and frozen and in blocks, or either be pre-breaded and go into a restaurant chain. So it was a different mindset, and that's kind of what we've had to do over the recent years, is to change how we operate. So we make shorter drags, that's tow time, and we have bycatch reduction devices, which is the turtle excluders, and the birds, which is fish, bycatch reduction devices. Just quick point on the TEDs, federally mandated since 1987 with a 4-inch metal grid, 4 inches in between bars. We pull 2 5/8 grids because with a tighter grid, you're going to exclude more things. So turtles work with a 4-inch grid because it's a big, large animal, or large fish like king mackerel or even big bull reds that might go through our nets will exclude with a 4-inch bar. But horseshoe crabs or cannonball jellyfish is one of the main reasons they go into the tail bag. But we went to a 3-inch grid, and now we're doing a 2 5/8 grid. So our end product is almost pure shrimp. I mean, there's times that we literally shovel it up, just picking out just small amount of bycatch or whatever it is, because of the tighter grid. So that increases the quality too, because if you are catching jelly balls or horseshoe crabs or whatever kind of bycatch, that changes your quality, your end product. So our mindset has been, niche markets and higher quality over volume. But I would say for us, we definitely use a lot more IQF, individually quick frozen, but that gives us sustainability. So we're 12 months out of the year, and that's important for restaurants, that they don't have to source somewhere else. And it's also good for our retail customers, because I'm going to have the same quality shrimp in February that I had in June or July, because we're able to kind of self-support ourselves with we use 40-foot ship containers. So we're able to stock our shrimp and work it out through our times when we are not catching it locally, or when there's a storm, or whenever there's something else. But being consistent 12 months out the year is something that we offer that most people don't, and we think it's important to be consistent.
I was never questioning the quality of quick frozen shrimp. I know they carry the same quality as fresh.
In a lot of ways, it might be better, because we stop that aging process immediately, and once it's frozen, then until we slack it out, until we put it in vats of water, it's basically like it was caught. So if I'm out there on an ice boat, like I said, those days, and then unless you bring it in and then freeze it, but again, you're 4, 5, 6 days behind where you were as it was being froze, as it was being caught. So our product is second to none.
Yeah, that's it.
That's the end. That's the end.